right. Often the majority is dead wrong. In this case, they were not only wrong, but all of them ended up dead, and they never made it to the promised land. So while the people were making up their minds, Caleb made this impassioned plea that is recorded in Numbers chapter 14, verse 9. He says, "Do not rebel against the Lord. Do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them." The phrase, "we will devour them," literally reads, "They are like bread to us. We are going to eat them up." How many of you like bread here? How many of you like bread? Those who even like will not agree that they like. But those of you who like bread, between the sliced bread and the unsliced bread, which one do you prefer? Sliced. Unsliced. Beautiful. You see, because the sliced bread, somehow to me, is not satisfying, You just take the slices and just, like this. By the time you take a bite, it's gone. But the unsliced bread, you cut it in chunks, isn't it? There's a kind of satisfying feeling when you just, hold the bread and just bread. I don't know how many people were inspired by that. Those who love bread, who heard what Caleb said, who imagined, cutting an unsliced bread. And I think in the time of Caleb, there was no sliced bread. In the time of Jesus, there was no sliced bread. All the bread they had was solid, will I call it mass, that you can just cut and bite. And I feel that unsliced bread is more satisfying. And Caleb said, they are like what? They are like bread to us. We will devour them. That is how a man of God talks. He doesn't see problems, he sees solutions. And that is how a man of God should think. And all of you young men here, you are men of God. Don't think it's only the pastor that is a man of God, though. It's a title. You give that title to pastor, say man of God, right? But if you are a child of God, you are either a man or a woman of what? Of God. Take note of that. So that when you are taking decisions, when you are faced with circumstances, say, look, I belong to who? I belong to God. I represent him. And therefore, I should speak with faith. Caleb saw the problems like everybody else. He was not oblivious to the issues at stake. He saw the same walls. He saw the same giants that the 10 spies did. It was not as if he was denying their report. No. He was well aware that what they were saying was true, but he had a different perspective. He knew that it was going to be a tough fight. But despite what he saw, Caleb knew that he had a big God. Amen. He understood that one man with God equals majority. Nevertheless, the people gave in to their fears and they were afraid to fight. And that is why they wandered in the wilderness for 40 good years. I mean, a journey of 40 days took them another 40 years. And within that 40 years, slowly, all the unbelieving generation were wiped out. And a new generation, was raised up. And Caleb had to spend extra 40 years in the wilderness through no fault of his own. In fact, Caleb wanted to enter the promised land like yesterday. But he had to stay back like he was part of the problem. But instead of spending that period of time complaining and griping, he spent that period helping to prep a new generation that will enter into the promised land. And so now we fast forward a little bit. When Moses died, Joshua led the new generation across the Jordan River. Jericho falls, Ai falls, and then they conquers the cities of the south and all the cities in the north. Now it was time to divide the land and then settle into the promised land. And here comes Caleb. Caleb was already 85 years old, yet he acts like he was 45. And sometimes I imagine that we need the kind of supplements or whatever program that he was following, because he was still going strong at the age of 45. And at the age of 85, we must dare to be Calebs of our time. He believed that once a soldier, always a soldier. He wasn't retired. He was ready to fight because once a soldier, always a soldier. Consider what God said about Caleb in Numbers chapter 14, verse 24. He says, my servant Caleb has a different spirit and he follows me wholeheartedly. His mind is not divided. Now, I would really love that on my resume. Now, God will say about me that I follow him wholeheartedly. God looked at Caleb and said, this man is different. He's not like others. He has a different spirit. And that was the secret of his life. Why did God bless Caleb? I have 3 suggestions as to why God blessed Caleb. Number 1, he believed God when others wouldn't. Now, peer pressure. We are doing a book. We have a book project at DSL. And I'm putting together a chapter titled Peer Pressure and Self-Esteem. And when I was doing a little research, I discovered, I thought peer pressure was always negative. But I discovered that peer pressure can be good and it can be bad. But one thing is certain, it is never easy to go against the crowd. It is not easy to move against the majority, especially when your friends are going in a different direction. When your friends are going in a different direction, it takes a lot of courage for you to go in another direction. It is difficult to stand for what is right when all your friends have decided to do what is wrong. If the people you know say it can't be done, it is hard to stand up and tell them that they are wrong. Very, very hard. Most likely, you will just go along. If your friends say, let us do this, and you know that what they are asking you to do is wrong, it is difficult to stand up courageously and say, no, I will not. At Kadesh Barnea, it was Joshua and Caleb against the whole nation. And understand why Israel followed the doubters, the naysayers. I am sure that they must have been very, very persuasive. Fear is contagious. Fear is very, very contagious. Let me give you an example. We close from church now, and we are stepping out of this hall, and then we see the security men at that gate, all of them running in this direction. They are running like that, just taking off. Are you going to stop to ask questions what is pursuing them? I doubt. I don't think anybody is going to pause. The wisest course of action is to first of all do what? Run and then ask questions later. So fear is very, very contagious. Before you know what is going on, you are already part of it. So who wants to enter a battle thinking that you are certainly going to lose? But the question is, how could the 10 spies get it so totally wrong? Who are you going to believe? Are you going to believe the 10 spies or are you going to believe the 2? Most likely you will believe the 10. Because their account was very vivid. And of course, Joshua and Caleb said, yes, what they have said is true. However, and that is where everybody is going to differ. It is very easy to follow the naysayers. It is human nature for us to follow the naysayers. But that doesn't make it right. But it helps us to understand what happened. And it helps us to understand human nature. If enough people repeat a lie, or if a lie is repeated long enough, pretty soon that lie begins to sound like the truth. And that's how you get fake news. My dear brothers and sisters, it sounded perfectly reasonable from a purely human point of view that the 10 spies were right. The Israelites did not stand a chance at all on their own. But God said, I will go with you. And that changes everything. When God goes with you, it changes. In fact, at some point at the beginning of the journey, Moses said, Lord, if you are not going with us, I am not what? I am not stepping an inch out of this place. So here was another point in time when it was not Moses who was asking, but God was saying, I will go with you. And yet, they were doubting. If God is with you, how can you lose? And that's the whole point, isn't it? That God is with you, you cannot lose. And I bet it that God has been with you all every step of the way from your 100 level up to this point. And that is why you have progressed this far. And I keep saying that those who give their time to be active as workers in the church, they don't fail. They don't fail. Because when you are spending your time working for God with all your heart, God is doing what? He's making up the difference for you. As long as you don't slack off, you don't use your work in the church as an excuse not to study, the Lord will surely stand up for you. Give Caleb the credit that he deserves. When the whole nation gave in to fear, Caleb stood up and alone against the multitude. The majority was dead wrong, but Caleb and Joshua were right. Number 2, he never let go of God's promise. God has given us a lot of promise. Somebody researched and found out that there are over 7,000 promises in the Bible. In other words, if you want to take one promise per day, you have an excess of over 6,500. You have an excess. In other words, you can claim God's promises for yourself each day. And Caleb was 40 years old when Moses sent out the spies to check out the promised land. And after the children of Israel made the wrong choice, he heard all their complaints. Caleb was not deaf. He heard all the complaints they were making. I wish we were back in Egypt. I am sick of this manna and this quail. Why are we going around in circles? Moses thinks as a leader, if I were in charge, I would get this thing organized. The people wouldn't stop complaining. On and on and on and on. Read Numbers, it's all there. The people complained and moaned and griped all day long for 40 good years. It must have wearied Moses. No wonder at some point, instead of speaking to the rock, he did what? He struck the rock. He was exasperated. I mean, we are parents and we're at home. You just tell your child, oh yeah, this morning we're going to eat swallow. There's eba and there is egusi soup, there is ogbono soup, there is, just make your pick, but it is swallow. And you see some children, the way they will just begin to, I'm not going to eat that, I'm not going to eat that, I'm not going to. And some parents are so tired of that, just for a few minutes. You don't want to see your child complaining. And some parents will give you, okay, what do you want to eat? I want to eat Indomie, or I want to eat Golden Morn, or I want to drink tea, or whatever. And parents give in. Who has won? The children, Abi? And it happens all the time. Most of the advertisements are geared at the children so that they will blackmail their parents into buying their products. If I were a parent whose children demand for what I did not offer, I said, okay, just keep the eba there. Keep it there first. When you're hungry, come and what? Come and eat. God will not shift ground for you because you are complaining. Because what he has asked you to do is the best for you. And so he will not shift ground. And as parents and parents-to-be, please hold your children very firmly. Lead them in the way of God and don't let them get their way, because getting their way will give them the impression that whatever you ask them to do, they can get their way by just, there's a word that is used to describe that. It's not sulking. There's another word for it. It will just be tantrums. The children will throw in tantrums, and because they are throwing tantrums, it wearies you quickly, and then you allow them to get their way. But now, I am sure Joshua and Caleb got tired of the constant capping. But now they were in the promised land. Moses is dead. The unbelieving generation is dead. Joshua had led them along a long string of victories, and the whole land stretches out before them. And after 45 years, Caleb steps back into the stage of biblical history. And he said, give me Hebron. Give me the hill country. It appears as though where he was asking for was a very easy place to get. But no. Hebron was the place where the cave of Machpelah was, that Abraham bought from the Hittite for 400 shekels of silver. Now, at this point in time, that place had become the burial place for all the founders of the nation, Abraham, Isaac, Sarah, Rebekah, Jacob, Leah, and so on and so forth. And Hebron was at this point in the hands of the pagans. And Joshua felt that he needed it back because that land belongs to God's people and he wanted it back. But they had walled cities and they had giants. And here was this man at the age of 85. Why did he say, I want that mountain? He said it because he never let go of God's promise. He never forgot what that land meant. And at an age when a lot of men are slowing down, Caleb was just getting started. He had the pedal, he had his feet on the pedal, and was not willing to step on the brakes. He was, like my friend would like to put it, if you are not dead, you are not done. If you are not dead, you are not what? Please, I want you to say that after me. If you are not dead, you are not done. If you are not dead, you are not done. As long as you are alive, God has a purpose for you. He has work for you to do. And so, the third point is that he wholeheartedly followed the Lord. I'm rushing now because my time is ticking. He wholeheartedly followed the Lord. This fact explained Caleb's success. And God testified to it, that he wholeheartedly followed him. And so, this fact tells us why God 6 times in the book of Numbers and Joshua tells us that Joshua wholeheartedly followed him. Caleb was a simple man to the core. He believed God. He remembered his promises. And in his old age, he was ready to claim the promises that God gave to him. I mean, it was easy for him to say, well, the promises were made when I was a younger man. Now that I'm an old man, I think the time is past for the promises to be claimed. But no, at 85, his mind was made up. Caleb didn't consult anybody to decide whether he would do what God has asked him to do. He didn't stick up his fingers to check which way the wind was blowing. He did not consult Joshua to ask him, are you sure God is going to fulfill his promise? He did not. He was not tossed to and fro by the winds of popularity and public opinion. He was not, tossed to and fro like double-minded people who can never make up their mind about anything. Caleb was different. If God said, take the land, Caleb said, grab your sword, boys. Let's go to war. He didn't let anyone to distract him from doing God's will. So what really happened at Kadesh Barnea? 10 spies said, look how big these giants are compared to us. Caleb said, look how small they are compared to our God. The coward said, they are too big for us to fight. And Caleb said, they are too big for us to miss. Amen. We are fighting a giant. It is possible for you to look at yourself that you are too small to fight him. On the other hand, it's possible for you to look at the giant and say, look, anywhere you throw a punch, you are not going to what? You are not going to miss. And when you have God behind you, you have God beside you, you have nothing to be afraid of. We need that spirit today. The spirit that can stand in